museum settings, to have people from all walks of life encounter art in their everyday lives and to see it fresh. And we did ask all the artists that have participated to reinterpret Jefferson for the future.
And my hopes for the year 2000 were to have a citywide, countywide exhibition. Since the millennium is traditionally associated with the hope for a new and better future, and Thomas Jefferson spent his life trying to learn from the past to create a better present and future, these two subjects were naturally joined.
The director of the, what is her name? She said to me that there's a photograph behind it, and then he paints on this acrylic which is over it.
She did it cool. Yeah, it's in 3 panels.
Mm-hmm.
3.
Right.
That too has acrylic over.
Yeah, you can see
plexiglass.
I can see the plexi.
Yeah.
Front or the back? This is the back, right?
Yeah. Flip it.
This is what we got.
Oh no, that's how we want it.
That's what we want it, right?
Yeah.
All right, you want to start slipping it on?
Put it. I mean, you can only get it.
Yeah, it can only go over the shoulders.
Yeah, you put it on.
Yeah, let's just.
I think once this down here is cinched in, it can't go up.
Oh, right. That. I'm still too big.
I was sitting out here for like personal interest. Somebody, I just found it last night. Like, yeah, it's a big fat lady. They're gonna put her up there, and they told me who she was and what it was about. And I was just laughing. I thought that was great. That's cool.
A lot of people aren't. From the wall, it's kind of at the base of. As you look at it, you sort of, have the Monticello in the background. I think so.
Hi.
archaeological dig excavation. So really, you know, what?
They get something big. How far were you?
Name is Jefferson. We're just looking and abstract understanding. Huh? Right.
This is what happened yesterday?
This is edited footage of the dig, and these are edited footage of questions and answers for tourists.
Abstract understanding.
But this was filmed yesterday?
You know who's digging in Egypt? So this is my digging bar. Yeah. Well, it's American. Just digging. Excavation site. Edited now.
Well, the location is here at Mount Pelier, which is the home of James and Dolly Madison. This was a recently discovered slave cemetery where many of the enslaved Africans were buried. Usually it was called an unmarked slave cemetery, and usually that's the way that many of these sites are referred to. But I find it really extraordinary that in actuality that the landscape itself is kind of filled with these incredible markings, if you will, or it's encoded in the landscape, that it wasn't an unmarked grave site. It was marked by these very simple quartz white stones, and that these stones were very much a part of this kind of African tradition. Usually the white stone was a way to communicate to the ancestral realms, and they were placed. Of course, they were like uncarved and unmarked stones, but they were placed within the landscape to mark the place. And then also the notion of planting a small cluster of the vinca minor, and you can see this entire site is just filled with the vinca that's growing here. And vinca was supposed to be really a plant, a symbolic of death. And also in European culture, it was often given to people before they entered the guillotine. It's a plant of death and a way of communicating with the underworld, or communicating with the world of the dead. So there are markings within the landscape, and for me, I'm really struck with the richness of the southern landscape, that in actuality, we have not lived so far in the future that these relics or these kind of living archaeological symbols are present here. I usually kind of work with things that just would have been part of the vernacular landscape. And in this case, I cast hundreds of kind of severed chicken feet. And for me, they really begin to look like roots. Are they roots and growing? Are they, I had collected also some very interesting old photographs of some of some of the slaves that had markings on their backs. And it's really kind of from the whippings, and they started to really look like this incredible network, or on the back. And at the same time, again, relating to some of the old photographs of scarification marks that were intentionally put on the backs and faces and arms and necks of people. So I was just really interested in this kind of layering of information, this composite, if you will. So we placed these a grouping of stones, several of the placings just here. And they are about the same diameter as the house-like structures. And also you can begin to see some of the trillium here. And this plant really was thought of in terms of the cross-like form, which would have been very much a part of the kind of African burial thing, dealing with the cosmogram of like the 4 moments of the sun. So I was really struck with this notion here. And also the parameters of these squares and how they're placed. They really relate very much to the house-like structures where the chicken feet are placed. And this is like the indigenous white quartz, and you can see it's a beautiful stone, very reflective when it catches the light, with these wonderful kind of veins running through it. Working with some of the students from U.Va, one young woman had a farm, and she really went out and we dug these white quartz, and you can find these they're prevalent in the landscape here. And just this notion of how they're very simplistic, very available to everyone, very mundane objects, but can be elevated to the highest order of communication, the highest order of monument building, if you will, or building basically, really, that's it, really a monument to the people and the process of living and surviving in the landscape.
A crow wanders from place to place. Being extremely shy, the crow says nothing, but sits upon a square floor cloth and shines shoes for free. The floor cloth circumscribes an arena for this exchange. But if the shoe shine is free and no money is exchanged, and if the crow is shy and no words are exchanged, then what is the nature of the crow's transaction? If there is no charge, then is there no customer? Yet there is one who labors and another who receives that labor.
How long were you beaten? I beat you 2 days. Yes, I did.
When shining shoes, the crow is literally underfoot. It is here, underfoot, where the transaction with the crow takes place. A foot is lifted to the platform of the shoe shine box, and the crow reaches to touch, cradle, and shine the shoe. From underfoot, the divide is bridged. The exchange with the crow is a social transaction. As members of human society, perhaps the most difficult task we face daily is that of touching one another, whether the touch is physical, moral, emotional, or imaginary. Contact is crisis. As the anthropologists say, every touch is a modified blow. Anne Carson, Men of the Hours. Epilogue. North, south, east, west, the grid is made whole, and the scattered belongings of the crow are gathered together. Shoes are shined for free. Yet the gap, the rift, the tear cannot be mended, and memory, like the crow, is absent. We camp a while in the wilderness, In the wilderness, in the wilderness. We camp a while in the wilderness, where the Lord makes me happy, and then I'm going on home.
This line here is a representation of the river. In a sense, the Rivanna River is right down below here. But it also represents moving through time. And the way the line comes up here and then swerves back, it sort of references moving through time but being informed by the past. Yeah, the colors represent the evidence of the Indians out west. Thomas Jefferson was one of the first people to start a real collection of Indian artifacts, and hence really started the whole idea of romanticizing Indian culture, which did two things. One, in a way, it sort of preserved them from annihilation, but it also, this myth was created about who the Indian people were.
And the soldiers, are those cowboys and Indians? Or
No, these are all Indians.
Okay.
The whole universe is there. That's the way medicine wheels typically. One of the things that I've been aware of is many, in a way, that's significant, but oftentimes they end up borrowing, say, they're going to demonstrate by their actions that the way to connect with the place is to start with your bare feet. To be left is their bare footprints. There's evidence and record that they are real people and that they are here.
So the matrix image was a early 20th century school photograph, a collective photograph from what you would consider a normal school. I think children from about 6 to 14, with the schoolmaster and 2 or 3 teachers, and then the background is a very stylized view of an impossibly existing Monticello with doll cutouts of Jefferson and Martha Jefferson, his daughter, on either side. One key part of it, I suppose, is the text. The text is lifted directly from a children's book published in 1967 called Meet Thomas Jefferson. So the statement that one thing, Thomas Jefferson hated slavery, and then the next line says, well, one thing Thomas Jefferson really liked was learning, kind of launches the enigmatic nature of the work. So it's really not about providing answers. Visually, yes, the not the answer, not even the solution or the resolution, but the presentation of here are these other wonderful people that are part of American history. Because basically what this work is it's a forgotten pantheon. You know, it's putting people together whose histories were, if not denied, certainly ignored. So you've got this great array, this constellation around the schoolmaster, if you will, of Jefferson. So his face is placed over the schoolmaster's face. And then you have well-known and anonymous faces, visages of Black Americans and Native Americans, replacing the school children. What's interesting is what it tells us about ourselves now. You know, what kinds of confusion, what kinds of strong negative and positive energies are evoked when we start talking about race. And one thing that is clear to me about race is that all of us have an embedded racism. I mean, that's absolutely clear to me, and it's something, whether we're black, yellow, white, red, or blue, or indifferent, we've always got to work with this kind of race consciousness. This is the lucky individual who can look at any person and say, you know, this is a person just like I am.
And another one?
Yes, maybe the Michael Mercil.
That's the three. Then he could use it. Travels with Charlie. Travel.
Yeah.
Due to the absence of solar modulation effects, cosmic ray ions in the work cloud should have significantly higher intensities at energies below a few GeV and those presently measured within the atmosphere of atomic at 50 to 100 AU from the sun. This is all 1974. Photons at energy less than 200 energy produce positive energy by direct ionization at cometary surface depth less than 100 grams per centimeter. At higher energy, the secondary products of the nuclear interaction with cometary oxide, for instance, H2O, would deposit much of the initial proton energy at depths of the order of 100 grams per centimeter squared. Cooper, 1983. On the other hand, the large fluxes of protons measured at energies below 30 MeV within the solar system, the found in about 1974, would penetrate to the depths of the order of 1 gram per centimeter squared. Locally accelerated ions in 100 MeV energy in the cometary atmosphere would affect only a micron-shaped operator. Comparison of predicted differential fluxes for protons and electrons in the solid state.
What interests me is this kind of animal sound of the pencil hitting the paper, and the texture of that is a kind of voice marking. There's the voice that's inside the room that you're held outside of is just the voice of the texture of the line. And then there's 16 speakers around the perimeter. And those are made when I was actually writing. And so what I'm doing is speaking at the pace of the hand writing, whispering the letters that are actually flowing out the end of the hand.
What's it
And
spelling?
it's the same way that if you walk around the video, you're actually, the line is moving at the pace of you walking, which is nice, sort of. And I put paper on a table the same length, and then I have the video camera in one hand and the pencil here, and I'm doing this.
Okay.
I'm winding round into that time. You know, it's like all the nuance of how you breathe and the temperature, and it's like about letting yourself be present, just in the immersion of doing that, of that winding.
And I always thought, what I like about this one is I always thought that you started with the history of the space and went from there.
It's always, I think you bring all your conceptual concerns and obsessions and interests, and mine right now is about what does it mean to have been a real material maker and now be more of a reader, which leaves no material trace. And so it's like the absence of the hand, and so how is that tactile and how is that experienced and what does that mean? That there's also a hand in my own process. And so where is the hand? It's in reading, but reading is no material trace. So I'm all caught up in the middle of that now.
And where's the record too?
And where is the trace?
Right.
And so, and where's the trace of that? Those things that now become invisible to us because we obviously are shifting the technologies that we are using a lot. And so, that comes with me, but it also finds a particular intersection here, not only with kind of some of American history, which is at the early part of the phase of the research, and then the particular site is a textile site. I didn't know this until it was actually underway, but apparently Monica told me that they manufactured coffin silk in here.
Wow. Oh, she would know.
Which is really interesting, and I found that out right after I had named it Ghost, a border act, thinking about all the meanings of the word ghost and line, and not even realizing that it was going to do this layers, like the way that they intersect and one chases the other, even though it's the same image, and a lot of those gifts you don't plan for them. It's that you venture something, and then a lot comes back when you're actually working in the site, and you understand. It's like I knew that I was interested in this kind of incessant horizontality of writing and landscape and thread, and this way that we delineate with that orientation, and our bodies are always crossing that. But then to walk in here and have the whole architecture divided along that very line by the way that it's painted. One of the little gifts of being in here is seeing that it actually does intersect with the line that's in here. I didn't know if these projectors would be strong enough, because I've never used them before, to actually do that.
Because you're following it, the line is sort of that horizon line that the image is following along like a track. And it's interesting because it's almost, and I'm looking at it now, it's neck height almost.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted it to be small on
I want to be like Joe.
Y'all want to move back, just it can tip in any different direction, so at least 30 feet from
I
here.
was sitting down here.
Be careful, Todd.
We'll have to figure out how we do it.
Osman Gunnar.
And this is a take of a lithograph by Blake. A poet, Edgar Young, Night Thoughts, was quoted in Breton's Surrealist Manifesto. I focused on Jefferson as a scholar's statement. To me, the most important part about his personality and his activity was the very strong belief in knowledge, a knowledge which he derived from tradition and from reading immensely. And there, the one who reads is me. That's autobiographical. I read for 4 months in Jefferson because I didn't know him. I looked exactly as puzzled, gorgeous as she looks, surrounded by Jefferson books, excuse me, until I, constructed my own theory.
Well, poetry walk is pretty much like most of my work. It's attempting to sum up the past and bring it into the future, into the present, so that we can live with it and use it in the future. It's bringing time together. It's trying to reach as far back as I can in the past and as far forward into the future. And it's partially Virginia history, where the students helped me tremendously. I got 3.5-inch worth of documents from Jefferson. And taking his writings out of context, so to speak, quoting him, made it like poetry. So he fits in with the poets. And I took poets from all over the world, people who impressed me and had something relevant to say. to all of us, especially the students at the university, where it's so important for them to have their curiosity awakened.
Migrating.
Looks like swallows to me.
They do look like
Sarah,
swallows.
you said they were bats. I said, these don't look like bats. No, they
They
look
look like
bats. I
swallows.
never said they're bats.
They look like swallows.
They're blackbirds.
Swallows look like it.
Are these
Yeah, I was running along here yesterday,
I like these
and
really
I love
fast
running up
ones.
against them. I could see them coming flying at me as I was running.
Swallows watch
like a
they
person in
look
front of
like
you
us.
open
They close
the
their
dress
eyes
so
and
beautifully open with their mouth.
they close their wings and
It took me a long time to figure out.
This is Bruce. Yeah, so this is, I came down here 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I drove down, went to the quarry. She sent me samples to see if it would take a bleed.
Right.
And
Because is this solid copper?
Yeah. You know, whenever it rains, it's active.
Was this already
and I
started?
I started it off.
In this.
Yes, I started it off because it takes 12 years. This roof is copper for it to go green.
So you
So
started it with some
I
acid.
just started it off with a mild
Little
acid,
pea.
yeah, and then it'll just take over.
And then will it leach out at all? Will it stay quite graphic?
It will, you know, the weather. It'll bleed all around.
Yeah,
here.
right.
It won't just go straight down.
It'll start spot. Like, well, you can even see right here. It's starting.
It'll take a wide
Yeah.
berth. You know, I just from observing, I looked at bank signs and saw, and that's what I began to see, the bleach on banks and copper that's embedded flush, leaching down, and that's what got me to think of and then I tested it on different kinds of stones. Trixie chose the spot. Here she had this oval in mind because she wanted it to lead into where she's going. And we had keyed in here a stone already, a black and white stone, so we didn't have to pour concrete for the base. So it was just in the center of this oval. So we just, with the farm equipment, put it down. Yeah.
And is this a local quarry? Like very local, quite close?
Yeah. So I just have it moved.
Oh, 11.
Sliced. smooth it out. Just how the gas is strict in the window.
Did she collect these nests or did she make them? Each
So
was
each
designed
one
for
was
that
a
nest.
composition of how the nest, and then I put the twigs in, also how the nest could
Beautiful.
sit in
To-
the
to
glass.
hold them and-
Yeah. So I said this one is a little hummingbird, so make it into a little teardrop.
Oh, nice,
and,
nice.
and you know, I didn't know, but glass blowers can constantly redo it.
Really?
Yeah, he makes this, I say no, and then he makes it different.
While it's-
while
while
it's
it's
warm,
warm,
it's
yeah.
heat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
and
can
it takes a month to get it cool. I mean,
When
this
did you
is
do this piece?
I did it a month ago.
No, I don't think.
And you see the artificial tree must fall, so everything is kind of breakable.
And you put the same
Nature.
red there to refer
And
to?
the same red to the artificial site for the bees.
Yeah.
And the bees are by me, the human. I made a bee house, which is not their world. I choose to put them in a triangle stacked on top of each other.
Oh.
But bees to function must be very densely together. So they are now the artist creating
They're
a
going.
dense environment like a labyrinth. And we just cut it a little now, but it has to be.
So this is the kind of bush that then becomes that way.
It is,
Whatever
yeah,
it's called. I
it
don't
is
remember.
going to bloom in a month, and then it has red berries. It bears red berries. It's
not,
an ilex.
So it's not the traditional
It's not a
labyrinth
traditional.
thing.
No, it's a different bush. I let you find your way, Lucio.
Try to find it.
Yeah, you try to find.
Tum-tum.
Wrong, wrong.
So,
I just go to the corner and let you
we have to go again there. So we came from there, right? So we took the wrong direction.
Okay.
We're starting here. Ah, now we can see the bees.
Yeah, you can also, of course, can go. They're Italian bees, actually, Lucio.
Really?
They are your compatriotas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they shall not sting you. They say ciao.
That's water for them. You made that so that they could
There's
have water?
water. And
What are they going to do, in
nourishment.
your opinion?
I wanted to, so now see what they're starting to build. They build these ears. To
Oh,
dance,
yeah.
go around and see, they have already danced the other side. Almost. One corner is on
here.
see? And look into here. You don't need to be afraid, they're fine. Look
Really?
into here, how they complete. That's what their task is. And they will do that with their, to survive. That's their survival instinct. They will dance and dance and build these piers and flops and labyrinths.
Are you pulling out the honey?
No.
No, you're just leaving
We
it.
will leave the honey in there so they can survive.
So they
and
just have their own house? And
they
that's
have
it?
their house, and they have ins and outs, so air goes through. I wanted to put honey or sugar water in here, but then the bee men say you will have ants and they will get a war, and the ants might take over, and you
really?
will be unsuccessful. Yeah, you will
God.
create a war.
The
And
ants are
so
capable of killing bees?
They are capable of marching, millions of them, and this will be black because they see sugar water here. They will
Oh.
want to drink that.
And that prevents the bees from having water?
And they could come in, and it could be. He said he doesn't know anything if it would be successful.
Wow.
He said, will it be successful? We have to see. Now he
What an
visited
interesting war that could be.
between the ant
Yeah,
and the
that
bee.
would be an interesting war. Wow.
But I was afraid. I didn't want that. I wanted to first see if this could be successful. And it was an experiment, and that's the shade. It's the ominous cloud
They seem
or
to
the
grow in
shade.
it though. different, like the kind of rainbow colors. Does that come from heating it or something?
Yeah, probably. And a welding torch.
That was your
They're
application.
like the-
What were you thinking?
I was thought it was a part of a car.
Oh, no,
Well, I guess they are found objects. Answers the description. I wonder how it references the Jeffersonian heritage or legacy. As with the bees, maybe that's kind of general interest in natural history or something. What's it called here?
Well, you know, I had been thinking about this this work a little bit before this exhibition came up, but only theoretically. I hadn't started to build it, and when this exhibition sort of came upon me, the theme and the association with Jefferson, it became clear that this work might be a good proposal for the situation here. But basically, it started simply with my response to these figures as I found them in this giant pastry store, this store in Manhattan that caters to professional pastry chefs. It's an enormous place with all of these things that they use to decorate cakes and things, enormous inventory, and in this enormous inventory are thousands and thousands of these figures, and I was just caught by them. I was drawn to them, and I bought hundreds of them, probably every variety they had, but they were quite consistent in many respects. They were comprised of large brides and grooms, and then smaller ones, and then the colors would change. Everything that's on the tree as I built it, it was represented as I first saw it in this giant store. And also the racial aspects were included in these figures that you would purchase normally. I guess a pastry chef or somebody would buy 2 of these, presumably, and put them on the top of the cake. And so I was buying hundreds of them, so I was able to see immediately that you could construct numerous interracial gender juxtapositions, which could be part of the armature structure of the very tree itself. It occurred to me that it was one of the most sort of not obvious, but certainly perhaps a more expressive way of putting these together was to structure them like a tree, or you could even say like a genetic model or a anatomic model coming from a main trunk and and spreading outward. I mean, it was kind of a formal decision as to how I could have stacked them all up in lines and perhaps approached it much differently, but the tree was the first thing. So it was actually this piece is extremely fluid in terms of its conceptualization. That means it came to me quickly. I made a quick model. There it was within a short period of time. The deliberation resulted in something quite specific. But the building of it was probably one of the most intensive things that I've done, because it's actually very traditional in terms of sculptural form. I mean, a lot of my work in the past has been much more radical in terms of formal elements. I mean, I've used earth. A lot of the works I've done are temporary, more site-specific when they integrate with an existing element outside. So this, in a sense, is quite, it's in the arena of traditional sculptural, I was going to say objects, but sculptural forms.
The piece is called Visionary Spirit. I have in the past worked with the figure, but not actually making a figure. It was figurative, but not figural. So it's really about the absence of the figure. And by presenting the 1814 gentleman's outer coat, sort of suggests the man without it being literal.
The burn. I bet they're going to like that tonight. Probably. They're probably going to burn that tonight if they didn't look up their bodies.
Well, the idea about the fire, I have in the past incorporated fire. Sometimes the aftermath of the fire, the mark of the fire. But there were times, I did 3 of these abstract figure pieces in Korea, and I ignited them at an opening ceremony. And as I was building this piece, I was thinking of this idea of rekindling the spirit of Thomas Jefferson, to remind us of his lingering presence and influence in our lives and our politics. So the fire was sort of a symbolic gesture.
So you were satisfied with what occurred last night?
I was tickled. I was tickled. I was just so glad it didn't fall over or anything like that.
I was sitting down here.
All right. I can't see Todd. You can come around to the side. Oh, there we go. There's an easy answer. Good. There's just a bit to your right side. I said that, everybody. Okay, right to me. Good. Yes. You getting this? Good.
Aiming to have this year 20,000 books and the 16,000 now, and it was mine.
And the town
But it is true, I was not so keen.